Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker, this is Sporting Logically, and today I wanted to do something a little bit different. In this video, I'm going to be going through some clues about various players and teams in the NBA, whether it be salary facts or accomplishments in the league or statistics, and it'll be y'all's job to try and guess what player or team I'm talking about. This is something I hope to do more episodes on in the future, so if you enjoy the video, be sure to let me know. Let's go ahead and get started. Starting off, we have the highest paid player in the Eastern Conference for this coming season, a four-time All-NBA selection, former #1 overall pick, and Rookie of the Year. However, he hasn't reached the conference finals in his career, despite being on 5 different 50-win teams so far in his career. And even with a lofty ranking as the 5th highest paid player across the entire league, he hasn't been named to an All-Star team since 2015. And the player is Blake Griffin. This one might have been a bit easy once I started talking about Griffin's accolades and lack of postseason success, but I'd be willing to bet that many of you didn't realize he's the highest paid player in the Eastern Conference for this coming season, and that even with that $31+ million salary, there are 4 players ahead of him in player salary across the league, and all of them play in the West. Now a member of the Pistons after a trade mid-season last year, Detroit is betting that Griffin will be able to put his recent injury issues behind him and once again be an All-Star and All-NBA level player. Next up is another player, this time the 18th highest paid in the league for next season, but he hasn't been named an All-Star yet in his career, the highest paid player across the entire league to not have an All-Star selection to their name. This also makes him the highest paid player on his team, despite 3 other players on the roster having been named All-Stars at one point in their careers. But he does at least provide good spacing from a statistical standpoint, having shot over 43% from 3 in each of the last 2 seasons. And the player is Otto Porter Jr. The beneficiary of a huge offer sheet from the Brooklyn Nets in the summer of 2017 that the Wizards ultimately matched, Porter Jr. sits at the top of Washington's player salaries for this coming season, ahead of 2018 All-Stars Bradley Beal and John Wall, as well as 8-time All-Star and newest Wizard Dwight Howard. For those of you that are curious, the list of players ranked significantly behind Porter in player salaries for next season includes Kawhi Leonard, Kyrie Irving, and Klay Thompson, among others, although all of them will be getting new contracts in the summer of 2019. The last player in this week's episode is the 6th highest paid across the entire league and the 2nd highest in the East, just behind Blake Griffin on both of those lists. He also has the distinction of being the highest paid player in the league to never have been named to an All-NBA team, and is just one of 3 players in the top 12 in player salaries to not have an All-NBA selection to their name to this point in their careers. And the player is Hayward. The interesting thing about this one is that even though Hayward doesn't have an All-NBA selection to his name yet, despite his high standing in player salaries, he was pretty close to being on one of those teams in 2017, which would have made him eligible for a Supermax extension that would have put him even higher in the player salaries rankings, and that could have even been enough to keep him in Utah rather than jump ship to Boston. In case you were wondering, the other 2 players in the top 12 in player salaries to have not yet been named to an All-NBA team are Mike Conley and Paul Millsap. Moving on now to the first team in this week's episode. This franchise has the 12th highest payroll in the league going into this coming season, nearly putting them at the luxury tax line, despite not having won 40+ games since 2016 and not being projected to make the playoffs this season. It's pretty incredible that their payroll is so high when you consider that they have the lowest paid All-Star from last season on their roster when you're excluding DeMarcus Cousins. But that's balanced out by paying 5 different players more money individually than that All-Star is making this coming season. And the team is the Charlotte Hornets. If you've ever watched my live streams or a few select videos in the past, you probably got this one pretty quickly. I've talked at length about how insane it is to me that Charlotte is paying so much money for such a bad team, especially one without much promising young talent, despite a number of former lottery picks on the roster. The one bright spot has been Kemba Walker, the all-star that I was talking about, who is the 6th highest paid player on the team at $12 million, with Nicholas Batum, Bismack Biyombo, Marvin Williams, Cody Zeller, and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist all above the 2018 All-Star in terms of 2018-19 salary. Moving on, we have the team with the lowest payroll in the league coming into this season among teams that made the postseason a year ago. They won 50-plus games last season, but only have one player making more than $13 million a year this season, and have only 4 players on the current roster that are 30 years old or older. Along with that low payroll, they have a good amount of salary coming off the books soon as well, and will have $30+ million in cap space in the summer of 2019. The team is the Philadelphia 76ers. Philly comes into this season with a $103 million payroll, the 4th lowest in the league and just a bit below Indiana's among teams that made the playoffs a year ago. They had plenty of cap space this past summer as well, but weren't able to bring in any big fish such as Paul George or LeBron James. So they instead decided to use it to bring back JJ Redick and trade for Wilson Chandler, both of which have contracts that will expire in 2019, effectively pushing off that cap space for another year. Chandler and Redick are the 2nd and 3rd highest paid players on the team, behind Joel Embiid, the only one making more than $13 million this season, as I mentioned. Those two also make up half of the 30 and over crowd that I mentioned, with Jared Bayless and Amir Johnson being the other 2. Next up is the team with the 2nd lowest committed payroll for the summer of 2019 and the lowest committed through 2020 at just $7.6 million total. This is part of a very long-term plan to turn the franchise around, as they haven't won 30-plus games since 2015 and haven't won 50-plus games since 2002, the only 50-plus win season in the franchise's NBA history. And the team is the Brooklyn Nets. If you watched my video on Billy King a few weeks back, you'd probably have seen this answer coming. That 38-win 2014-15 season was the last time they made the playoffs and the beginning of a tough rebuild that has seen the team win just 69 games combined over the last 3 seasons. With Kenny Atkinson and Sean Marks now in charge as head coach and GM respectively, they've managed to put the franchise in great position to improve via free agency in 2019 and 2020. In case you were curious, that lone 50-win season I mentioned was the first of back-to-back years in which they lost in the NBA Finals under head coach Byron Scott, a year that also sparked 6 consecutive seasons with at least 40 wins. Last up is once again a team, but this time the clues come in one long string of facts, so pay attention. Of the top 33 highest paid players in the league for this coming season, this team employed 3 of them at the start of the 2016-17 season, including 2 of the top 5 highest paid across the league, but none of them remain on the roster for this season. And the team is the LA Clippers. That might have been a bit confusing to understand, so let me explain. For this coming season, Chris Paul ranks 3rd in the league in player salaries at $35.6 million, Blake Griffin is 5th at around $32 million, and DeAndre Jordan is 33rd at $22.8 million. All 3 of those guys were on the Clippers roster at the beginning of the 2016-17 season, even though obviously their salaries then weren't the same as they are now. But now going into the 2018-19 season, all of them play for different teams. Those Clippers teams with all of those guys around obviously had a lot of success in the regular season, but had well-documented playoff, injury, and team chemistry issues, especially near the end. It's just crazy to think that a team had 3 guys that were worth that much money, all on the same roster, but never made it to the conference finals, despite multiple 50-plus win seasons. They do have one claim to fame, however. That 2013-14 Clippers team that won 57 games and lost in 6 games to the Oklahoma City Thunder in the conference semifinals was the last Western Conference team to defeat the Golden State Warriors in a 7-game series. And there you have it, the very first NBA Jeopardy episode. I just want to say that I had so much fun making this, so if you guys enjoyed it and you want to see more, then any and all support that you give to the video would be a great way to let me know. I'll be back on Monday talking about some teams that might look very different by the time 2019 comes around than they do going into this season. So be on the lookout for that. Once again, my name is Tucker. This is Sporting Logically. If you missed any of my previous Monday, Wednesday, Friday videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.